Hello everyone, I'm just going to give a couple of minutes for people to just filter in. Before we get going. Okay, I'll just kick us off. Hello everybody, and thank you very much for joining us this afternoon to find out more about Glasgow Airport's draft noise action plan, which we are currently consulting on. The team will introduce themselves as we go through the slides, but just a quick hello from me first up. My name is Katie. I work for a company called Cavendish, and we are supporting Glasgow Airport with this consultation. Just a little bit of quick housekeeping before I hand over to Matthew, just to make you aware that we are recording the session here today. And you can submit questions at any time using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We'll have some time at the end to go through those questions, so do feel free to submit them as we go through our presentation. And now I will hand over to Matthew to introduce himself and the airport.
Thanks, Katie. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Matthew Wilson. I'm the head of aerodrome operations for Glasgow Airport. My involvement here is in my responsibility for airside operations and air traffic control through National Air Traffic Services. I report directly to the Managing Director for Glasgow Airport. So obviously, thanks for those of you who are attending and participating today. We significantly appreciate the time taken to help us with the 5-yearly review of and comment on the draft of our noise action plan for Glasgow Airport. So I don't want to drag this out too terribly. There's a lot for the team to go through. What I would say is, again, we appreciate your contribution so far as being here, but we would encourage contribution and questions as we take you through the draft noise action plan now and thereafter in follow-up communication. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Callum, who will start to take us through the draft noise action plan.
Thank you, Matthew. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Callum. I'm an acoustic consultant for a company called Arup, and I've been supporting Glasgow Airport in the development of their noise action plan. So I'll be doing the bulk of the presentation today. I aim to speak for about 25 minutes or so, just to take you through the noise action plan. And then, as Katie said, there will be time at the end for questions. So what I'm going to do is provide a summary of the noise action plan and the key actions. So I'm not going to talk about the whole document. It's quite a lengthy document, and there's quite a lot of information on the consultation website. So we do encourage you to review the document itself and the information on the consultation website before answering the consultation questions. But hopefully this webinar is a useful session just to bring out some of the key aspects of the noise action plan, and in particular the areas that we are asking for your views on. So we'll be drawing that out as I go through the presentation, but just so that it's kind of in your mind at the beginning, and as we go through the the 3 key areas that we are seeking your feedback on are to do with the noise insulation scheme. So the airport operates a noise insulation scheme currently, but as part of the noise action plan, we're proposing to substantially extend the eligibility criteria for that insulation scheme, which would make approximately 650 additional properties eligible for funding to insulate against aviation noise. And we're also reviewing and improving the noise reporting process, so how the airport communicates noise information through, for example, the annual noise reporting and also the noise webpage. So we're seeking feedback on that means of communication, whether you think that's useful and whether there's anything that the airport could usefully add. And then finally, we are just seeking general views on the noise action plan itself. So feel free to respond on any aspect of the plan. There are free text questions in which you can provide your feedback on any aspect of the document and noise management at Glasgow Airport. So before I go into the noise action plan itself, I do just want to touch upon the airspace change proposal, which many of you may be aware of. So like most airports in the UK, the Glasgow Airport is currently undergoing a process of modernising its airspace, which is a requirement from the Department for Transport. And this is through a process known as the Airspace Change Proposal. Now, that's a very separate process to the Noise Action Plan, and it's regulated by the Civil Aviation Authority. And it has separate rules and regulations. And in fact, we're required to do a separate consultation specifically on the airspace change process. So really, I set that out just to make the point that this webinar today is about the Noise Action Plan, not the airspace change proposal. So we won't be talking about airspace change this afternoon. And there are no changes to flight paths proposed as part of the Noise Action Plan. That's all for the separate airspace change process. So there will be a separate consultation for the airspace change process, and more information on that will be available later this year. So please do go to the airport website and review the information on airspace change there, which will provide all that information. But what we are talking about today is the Noise Action Plan. So what is a Noise Action Plan? Well, there's a legal requirement to produce a Noise Action Plan. It's part of the environmental noise regulations. And the regulations operate in 5 yearly cycles, known as rounds. So we're actually in round 4. And they operate for 5 years. So the current draft Noise Action Plan would operate from 2024 to 2028. And the intention of the Noise Action Plan is that it presents noise mapping to provide a sort of snapshot in time of the noise exposure of an airport, and then to describe the approach that the airport is going to employ to manage, and as far as reasonably practicable, reduce the total adverse effects of aviation noise over the next 5 years, for which the Noise Action Plan covers, and also longer term noise management measures. In terms of how the Noise Action Plan has been developed, this has been done in consultation with the Glasgow Airport Consultative Committee. So if you're not familiar with that group, it is a committee that's formed of an independent chair and representatives from various councils, including West and East Dunbarton, Glasgow City, Renfrewshire, Inverclyde, Argyll and Bute, and North and South Lanarkshire. It also includes business development organisations, the travel trade, airlines, airport operators, and passenger representatives. And the draft Noise Action Plan was shared with the Consultative Committee through regular committee meetings, and then the document itself was shared in full for the committee to comment on. And the chair of the Consultative Committee confirmed that they considered the Noise Action Plan to be clear and informative, and that there were no areas that they considered needed expansion or amendment. They did ask for a minor clarification to be made on the text on the separate airspace change proposal, and that's been actioned within the document that is out for public consultation at the moment. So indeed, the document is out for public consultation. That's why we're here today as part of this webinar. You can view the document on the consultation website along with all the supporting information, and please do provide your feedback on that document through the surveys on the consultation website. So once the consultation is closed and we've taken all that feedback, we will review that and we will update the Noise Action Plan as necessary. And then we'll republish the Noise Action Plan, including information on all the feedback that we received, responses to that feedback, and importantly, how and where we've updated the Noise Action Plan in response to that consultation feedback. So talking then about noise management at the airport, there are various different national and international initiatives and regulations and policies that the airport must follow. They're imposed by various different bodies. So internationally, there is the International Civil Aviation Organization, or ICAO. There is aviation noise policy set by the UK and Scottish government. There are also local authority requirements, and of course, voluntary commitments put forward by Glasgow Airport themselves. And in particular, one of the aspects I want to touch upon is put forward by ICAO, which is the International Civil Aviation Organization, and that is the concept of the balanced approach for noise management. So ICAO, of course, recognizes, as does the airport, that aircraft noise is one of the most significant causes of adverse community reactions relating to the operation of airports. And as a result, it requires all of its member states to adhere to an approach to noise management known as the balanced approach, which aims to address noise management in an environmentally responsive and economically responsible way. And it involves 4 principal elements. You can see those on the right of the slide there. The first element is reduction of noise at source. So this is all to do with the technology of aircraft themselves, so quieter engines and quieter airframes. Then there is the land use planning and management pillar, which is to do with sensible planning policies and development in the vicinity of airports, as well as the provision of noise insulation to improve the internal noise environment for sensitive buildings around the airport. The third pillar is noise abatement operational procedures. So this is operational procedures that aircraft can use when they are landing and taking off from the airport to improve noise emissions. And then finally, operating restrictions on aircraft. And the balanced approach is a legal requirement, and it requires that before any operating restrictions are imposed, that all other aspects of the balanced approach have been thoroughly tested and exhausted. So the Glasgow Airport Noise Action Plan adopts that balanced approach. So you'll see it within the document that's kind of structured following those four pillars. But we've also added a fifth element titled Working with Our Local Communities. And this is because the airport recognizes, of course, the importance of transparent communication of noise information to the local communities. So, as I mentioned just before, part of the Noise Action Plan requirement is to undertake noise modeling. And it actually specifies the year that we need to undertake noise modeling for, which is 2021, and I'll touch upon that in a moment. But this is just one of the examples of the noise maps that's produced for the Noise Action Plan. This one is a daytime noise contour, but all the rest of the noise contours are available within the Noise Action Plan and on the consultation website. And these maps, along with the annual noise monitoring and noise modeling that is undertaken by the airport, are used to inform the long-term noise reduction strategy. So as well as the contour images, there's also data provided about the size of the contours and the population and number of dwellings within each noise contour. And these are produced using quite sophisticated noise modeling. So it takes into account the aircraft that fly to and from Glasgow Airport, specifically in terms of using radar track data to understand exactly where aircraft fly, both in terms of the track that they follow along the ground, but also the rate of climb and the angle with which they descend. And there's quite a involved validation process for that noise model using the radar track data, which is specified and approved by the Civil Aviation Authority. But of course, we should touch upon the fact this is 2021 noise modeling. That simply is a result of the 5-year cycle of the legal requirement for the Noise Action Plan. So the previous year for noise mapping was 2016. Before that, it was 2011. And it just so happens that the legal requirement lands on 2021 this year. But of course, we do recognize that that is or was an anomalous year in terms of air traffic because of the ongoing recovery from the COVID pandemic. So we have provided information within the Noise Action Plan to kind of make that clear that this is an unusual year, less air traffic than usual, therefore smaller noise contours. However, it's important to note that the airport does model noise annually based on the actual movements that occurred each year. So please don't be concerned about the 2021 modeling. It hasn't influenced the noise controls in any way. It just happens to be the year that we are legally required to report on. So I will start talking now about the Noise Action Plan table itself. So this is one of the sections of the Noise Action Plan document, and it's actually a table which sets out the 25 actions that are within the Noise Action Plan. Some of these are existing actions that the airport has been doing for a number of years, and some are new actions which are being introduced or have been introduced over the recent years. And the table is sort of structured, again, following that balanced approach. And it sets out for each action a performance indicator, so that's something tangible and measurable that the airport can monitor adherence against. It will include timescales for that particular action, and that might be ongoing for something that is happening regularly, or it might be a certain time scale by which the action is to be completed. And then there's also an estimate of the number of people that would benefit from that particular action. So the next few slides, I'm going to go through some of those key actions. I'm not going to go through all 25. I don't think we'd have time to do that. But I'll pick out some of the key ones. And again, in particular, I'll be talking about some of the actions that we're seeking feedback on. So as a reminder, that's extending the existing noise insulation scheme. It's reviewing the reporting process. And then finally, just any views on the noise action plan that you'd like to give. So one of the first actions within the table is under that working with our local communities pillar, and this is to do with a new piece of publicly available software that the airport has introduced, which is a visualization and modeling software. And what it allows you to do is in near real time, you can view aircraft flying into and out of the airport. You can see the track that they are following, and you can also see information about the airline, about the aircraft type, its altitude, and also an estimation of the noise footprint as a result of that aircraft flyover. You can view it in real time, and you can also look back in time at a particular time period if you're interested in understanding what occurred at the airport on a particular day or time of day. And it's publicly available. We hope this is a useful piece of software to sort of better understand how the airport operates and the potential noise levels from individual aircraft events. And we do have an action to monitor how communities feel about that piece of software, whether it's useful, and also to try and improve the usage of it, because we hope it is a useful piece of software to better understand the airport's operations. So you can see that it's there's a URL you can click on here. These slides will be shared later, but you can also view this directly from the airport noise webpage if you'd like to view it from there. Oops, gone over too fast. So the other aspect of working with the communities is about communicating noise information. So there is a dedicated noise website. Please do visit that webpage if you haven't already. It provides frequently asked questions on noise issues that communities have raised. It also provides links to things, for example, like this noise action plan document or the annual noise reports or the airspace change information. And of course, the visualization software that I just mentioned are all accessible from that web page. That's also one of the means through which complaints are raised. And we do seek to respond to 100% of complaints within 5 working days. And we report all complaint and inquiry statistics to the consultative committee and also in the annual noise reports. But importantly, that complaint and inquiries procedure has recently been reviewed, and the airport has actually employed a specialist contractor to review and improve the approach to dealing with complaints and inquiries, as well as a review of how that data is reported externally. And as a result of that review, the airport's in the process of upgrading its systems to enable an improved analysis of trends so that they can better understand what the concerns are, where they're coming from, and so on, to help work with the local communities better. That complaints process will also be used in combination with the noise and track keeping system, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later in this session, to investigate any complaints related to off-track infringement, so we can understand exactly what has occurred and at what time that might have caused a particular complaint. Another important aspect of working with the local communities is the Flight Path Fund, which is established in 2010. And it's to ensure that local people share in the success of Glasgow Airport, and the airport takes great pride in the active role that it plays in supporting the neighbouring communities. And what it does is it provides financial support to charities and community groups that are committed to improving the facilities and services available to the local community. And it focuses on 3 key areas of employment, education, and environment. And it's an important part of the wider sustainability strategy of AGS Airports, which owns Aberdeen, Glasgow, and Southampton Airport. As of 2023, the fund has awarded 1.8 million to more than 850 community groups, charities, and innovative projects. And it's funded directly from Glasgow Airport itself, which makes an annual donation to the fund. It also raises passenger collections within the airport. But a new action that's being introduced in this noise action plan is that actually fines will be introduced for off-track occurrences. So if airlines and aircraft go off track from their noise abatement procedures, those can be monitored using the noise and track keeping system, and a fine can be levied, and then those fines would be directed towards the Flight Path Fund so that the money goes back into the community. So we have a couple of actions here you can see on the slide, which is to continue to use the Flight Path Fund and also to introduce a system for fines and distribute those towards the Flight Path Fund. So moving on then to the next pillar in the balanced approach, which is reduction of noise at source. And this is something that isn't actually directly within the airport's control. The airport does not purchase the aircraft that the airlines use, but what it can do is it can influence the adoption of quieter aircraft throughout the industry, and it does that in a couple of ways. One is by representation through sustainable aviation, which the airport is a member, and adoption of a sustainable aviation roadmap, which sets out how the UK aviation industry as a whole will limit and where possible reduce the impact of aircraft noise. And this is something that we can actually measure. So over the last 50 years, aircraft have reduced their noise output by 75%. So each new generation of aircraft as they're being introduced are substantially and measurably quieter than older aircraft. And we see this progress continuing today. So the aircraft that are entering the service in the past few years, so you might have heard of the Airbus A320neo, for example, which replaces the Airbus A320, have on average a noise footprint that is between 30 and 50% of that of the aircraft that they are replacing. And again, that's down to improved technology within the aircraft design, so principally quieter engines and more aerodynamic airframes. More specifically to the airport operates a differential landing charge system, which is a financial incentive for airlines. So what it means is that actually noisier Chapter 3 aircraft, which is a way of measuring the noise output of aircraft, are subject to a 50% weight surcharge for using the airport. So effectively, noisier aircraft have to pay more, which therefore provides an incentive for airlines to invest in new aircraft technology. There's also a different charging system at night, which actually provides discounts to the quietest aircraft types in recognition of the importance of the impact of aircraft noise during the nighttime period. So returning again to the actions, there's an action to both to continue using the differential landing charge system, but also to review that landing charge system to determine whether make sure that it's being successful incentivizing the adoption of quieter aircraft, but also whether there are any other methods of incentivization that would be viable to introduce to further encourage that adoption of quieter aircraft in the Glasgow airport fleet. Oh, apologies. Another important aspect of noise control at the airport is to do with ground noise. So this is associated essentially with all the noise that aircraft in the airport makes on the ground. So not aircraft while they're in the sky, but while they're on the ground. And there's various different noise sources that can be. So aircraft moving, what's known as taxiing from their stands to the runway, or aircraft using their auxiliary power units, which is a power system that the aircraft will use to power its onboard systems like the air conditioning and lighting and computers and so on. That can be a source of noise. And also for safety reasons, aircraft need to test their engines. So they will occasionally need to run their engines up whilst on the ground for safety reasons. All of these are potential sources of noise that should be controlled and mitigated by the airport. And it does that through various different ways. So for example, there are restrictions on the duration of engine ground runnings. So they should only occur during the day and be restricted as far as possible to 20 minutes in duration. And there's a more strict restriction in early morning period that it should be only to 5 minutes and at idle power, which produces lower noise levels. And the engine test running and ground running of engines is not permitted during nighttime hours, except under exceptional circumstances. And that does sometimes occur, again, for safety critical reasons. But generally speaking, unless it's a exceptional circumstance, they're not allowed during the nighttime period. And then in terms of controlling and mitigating the noise of auxiliary power units and other aspects of the aircraft on the ground, the airport has been installing what's called fixed electrical ground power at the international stands, which in very simple terms means that the aircraft can kind of plug into the stands and get their power from the stands themselves, which means they don't need to run their onboard power systems. So there's a noise reduction there. And then again, there's an action to roll out fixed electrical ground power at the other stands as well. So there's a few actions associated with that. So it's to do with continuing to enforce those policies, continuing to roll out fixed electrical ground power, but also importantly, a new action, which is to undertake noise monitoring of engine ground running and ground activities to better understand its impact on particularly the closest neighbors to the airport. And then that information, that monitoring will be used to review the ground running policies and also to investigate whether any potential further control measures are necessary. Excuse me. So the next pillar is noise abatement operational procedures. So this is to do with the operational procedures that aircraft use when they're landing and taking off from the airport. And there are two particular operational procedures that are monitored at the airport, and these are known as continuous descent operations and continuous climb operations. And these, they're operating techniques that aircraft can use that deliver environmental benefits, so noise reduction, but also reduced fuel burn and other associated emissions. It's a more efficient way of using the aircraft. So that's actually air traffic control that facilitate the use of these procedures. And it's not always possible. It's usually, again, down to safety and weather when these procedures aren't possible. But the air traffic control does aim to maximize the adherence of continuous descent and continuous climb operations as much as possible. We do have targets that are set annually and reported on annually within the annual noise monitoring reports on how often CDO and CCO are met. And those targets are generally met as well in our, which you can see in our noise report. So every year we do meet and exceed those targets. So yeah, again, a couple of actions there to continue to employ these procedures and to monitor and report on adherence to those targets. Another really important tool that the airport uses in understanding noise is the noise and track keeping system. So this is a system, sort of radar system, which allows the airport to monitor for every aircraft movement, how it flies, where it flies, when it flies. So it's very useful in terms of investigating complaints to understand what is causing a particular noise disturbance. We will also use that then to monitor adherence to the noise abatement procedures and understand when off-track occurrences are happening, and fine airlines distribute those to the Flight Path Fund, as I've mentioned earlier. But another aspect of the noise track keeping system is actually the noise side of it, which is the noise monitoring terminals. So there are two noise monitoring terminals near to the end of each runway, and also one actually on the airfield itself. And those noise monitoring terminals continually measure the departure noise levels of aircraft as they take off from the airport. And those noise levels are compared to targets, to limits, violation limits. And if an aircraft is to exceed those limits, again, it is fined. And then those fines are distributed to the Flight Path Fund, so bringing the money back into the community again. So yeah, actions again related to that. So how we're going to use those noise and track keeping systems, and also to fine aircraft in breach of the departure noise limits using the noise monitoring terminals. So onto then the land use planning and management side of the balanced approach. So the key thing to talk about here is the noise insulation scheme. So the airport operates a noise insulation scheme at the moment to mitigate noise for the communities that are most affected by aircraft noise. And it's actually the UK government that sets the threshold for eligibility for noise insulation schemes, and it's currently set at 63 decibels. So the scheme provides a financial contribution towards noise insulation for both residential properties, hospitals, and schools that are within that 63 decibel contour. And the way the scheme works, particularly for residential properties that are eligible, the airport will write to those properties and then will undertake a assessment that is specific to each property. So this is actually a physical survey that occurs at the property to identify what the most appropriate insulation would be for that particular property. And that may, of course, depend on, every building is slightly different in terms of its construction and age and so on, and existing performance of the noise insulation. So that survey is quite important to make that recommendation. And as a result, the scheme might recommend different types of insulation. It will vary from building to building, but it might include replacement or enhanced windows, acoustic air vents, or simple wall-mounted ventilation systems, loft installation, or perhaps replacement or enhanced external doors. But importantly, as part of the noise action plan, the proposal is actually to extend the eligibility for the noise insulation scheme. So to go beyond the government 63 decibel contour and extend that down to the lower eligibility threshold of 60 decibels. And that would quite dramatically increase the number of properties that would be eligible for the insulation scheme. We've demonstrated that within the noise action plan by looking at 2023 data. So for the current 63 decibel insulation scheme in 2023, there were less than 5 properties that were eligible for that scheme. For the expanded 60 decibel scheme, if that were to have operated in 2023, there would have been approximately 650 eligible properties. So a substantial increase in the number of properties, particularly in the White Crook area of Clydebank under the arrival flight path. So this is something that is quite a big change to the noise insulation scheme. So we're really interested in feedback on that particular aspect of the noise action plan. So you'll see here there's a call out because there's a specific question that we are interested in seeking your views on that extension to the noise insulation scheme. And then I think this is my final slide, and this is to do with the monitoring and reporting. So as I mentioned on the noise action plan table, each action has key performance indicators, and that's quite important because that allows us to monitor the rollout of the various actions and whether or not they've been completed. So that will be reported within our annual noise reports. And the annual noise report is quite a comprehensive report that covers a number of things. So it reports on statistics, including the number and the type and the time of day of aircraft movements. It reports on adherence to the continuous descent operations and continuous climb operations that I mentioned previously. It reports on the number and the timing of engine test runs, statistics on noise complaints, information on any community engagement that's occurred within the last year, and then, of course, importantly, it reports on progress against the actions within the noise action plan each year and what's been achieved. And then within what we're asking questions about is actually on that noise report, do people find that useful? Is there anything that you think we should add to that? Is there anything more that we should communicate? Please do let us know. We're very interested to hear on how people are finding those reports and whether they're useful. And similarly to the noise webpage, which is a kind of one-stop shop for all the noise information. So that's where the frequently asked questions is, but also where you can find links to everything else, such as the noise reports, this consultation, the noise action plan, and the visualization software that I mentioned near the beginning of the presentation. So similarly, we're interested, please have a go to the webpage, have a look at it, and let us know if you think it's useful or if there's anything that you think it'd be useful for us to add to that webpage. So though it's not specifically about noise, of course, the airport does understand the trade-off between noise and sustainability. So we just wanted to touch upon the sustainability strategy for AGS. I think at this stage, I will hand over to Fiona, who's going to talk to this briefly.
Thanks, Cal. So my name is Fiona Smith. I'm the Sustainability Director for Glasgow Airport. Just wanted to make sure that we did pick up on the wider piece, although this is a document around about how we can improve on our noise performance. It was just to make you aware that noise does feed into our sustainability strategy, and we are undertaking a sort of full review of sustainability and how we can impact more improved sustainability as an airport and as an airport group as well. So there are a number of initiatives that we work on at Glasgow Airport, and we're committed to achieving net zero carbon for our direct emissions, which are the emissions that are generated by us, the airport operator, by the mid-2030s. So there are a number of things that we're doing, and it was just to let you know how that noise ties into the kind of wider piece. And we recognise that there's more to do in this, not only for ourselves, but in the aviation industry in general. But we're really committed to trying to improve on that. Thanks, Callum.
Thank you very much, Fiona and Callum. So as we have covered today in the presentation that we've just been through, we are seeking feedback on this draft noise action plan, and the questions are up on screen just for reference at the moment. They are split over 3 surveys on Commonplace. You can see the link on screen and the QR code at the moment. So if you go onto Commonplace, the 3 surveys that these 6 questions are contained within are all linked right in the top section. So it's hopefully nice and easy to go onto that site to give us your feedback. And it shouldn't take more than a couple of minutes to answer each one of the surveys. And we really do appreciate the time you're giving to share your views with us and inform the plan. So thank you very much for that. Callum, if you could just flick on to the next slide, please. Thank you. And if you do have any further questions after this session, the contact details are up on screen at the moment. Repeat of the website link and the QR code on there as well. So if you do have anything else that you'd like to ask, please do feel free to get in touch with those methods shown on screen. And just to let you know that we do also have a second webinar, the same presentation as you've heard today, but if you do have any further questions that you want to come back and ask, or you have a friend or a colleague who wasn't able to join us today, there's another session being held on the 1st of October at 5 o'clock. And that link is in the same website where you found this one. We'll also be uploading the recording to the website with the slide deck. So if you want to revisit anything that you've heard today, you can come back and do that at any point following this session. We've had a few questions in, so I think we'll just go through those now, but do feel free to add any other questions into the chat as we answer these. So the first 2 I'm going to direct towards Fiona, please, and I'm going to ask them together because they are on a very similar topic. So the person's asking about a 3.2 degree RNAV approach and asking when Glasgow will introduce that for runway 23, and then also citing early departures, early turns and departures to avoid certain communities, and asking if that would be possible when runway 05 is in use for Bearsden. Fiona, would you mind answering that one, please?
Thanks, Katie. So I just want to draw your attention. Callum had mentioned this in his presentation, but just to go back to it. So we are, in parallel to the noise action plan consultation, also undertaking what's known as an airspace change consultation. And I know it can be quite confusing as to why things are being done differently, but both of these processes are legislated and have their own prescribed ways of consulting on them. So we have no option but to keep these things very separate. And on the airspace change programme, there's a very prescribed process for consulting on changes to the routes the aircraft fly. So these 2 points are very much in that camp and relate to our ongoing airspace change programme. And we have considered all different elements of design and how we might operate both arrivals and departures. So on that, the airspace change process, it will be consulted on. It's the current timelines for that are for us to be consulting by the end of November, start of December, but that is dependent on receiving permission from the Civil Aviation Authority to go ahead with that consultation. And during that will be the first opportunity where we can actually discuss our preferred option. We have had various engagements with communities over the past couple of years in the lead up to this, but that will be a full open consultation where communities can give their comments and feedback to our proposals. And you can find all the information to that on our noise page again on our website. Hopefully that answers the question. Sorry, I can't give you the actual specific answers to these two, but the process means that that has to come through at the same time as everyone else has the opportunity to discuss it. So.
Great, thank you, Fiona. I think the next question is coming your way as well, and I know we covered this off, but maybe just helpful just to recap it. But the question is about whether Glasgow offers airlines incentives to operate newer and quieter aircraft into the airport.
Okay, great question. So at the moment, we offer what Callum referred to as differential landing charges, and those tend to be more focused around fining aircraft that are within certain categories. We don't currently offer landing fees on new models of aircraft, but we are aware of other airports doing this, and we really would like to consider doing something similar. So this is one of the points that we'd really like to hear your feedback on, especially if it's something that you have heard about or you've experienced on, you know, please feed it in. But that will be part of our review, and it's covered under Action 9, where we commit to undertaking that review and looking at what other airports are doing, seeing what we can learn from them.
Great, thank you very much. The next question I think I can answer. So the question is about whether we'll be sharing a link to the recording of the session today for the people who have attended. The answer to that is yes, we will. When it's posted up online, everyone who attended today will get an email out with that link and with the attachment of the slide pack as well. So that will be sent over to you as soon as it is uploaded and available. The next question, not entirely sure whether this would sit with Fiona or Callum. Is there any consideration of the pitch of the noise as well as the overall noise level?
That's probably one I can answer. In short, yes. So the frequency content of aircraft is taken into account in the noise measurement and the noise metrics that we undertake, using a process known as A-weighting, which reflects how the ear responds to certain pitches or frequencies of the sound. It's important to note, of course, there are lots of different ways of measuring noise. There's lots of different ways of describing it. Different people will respond differently to different types of noise. It can be quite a subjective experience. So what we do is we rely on research and policy and regulation in terms of the best way to measure and understand aircraft noise. So the metric that we use, for example, in our assessment of noise and for the noise insulation scheme, is based on research undertaken by the Civil Aviation Authority about the best way to measure noise and understand how people are going to respond to it. There's no one perfect metric, but of all the metrics that were analyzed that look into different aspects of the noise sound, the LAQ is the best one to correlate with adverse noise effects such as annoyance or sleep disturbance. And it does take into account the frequency content or the pitch of aircraft sound.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Callum. We've had one more question come back on one of the answers earlier. So Fiona, I think this is one for you, if that's okay, please. The person is saying that the 3.2 degrees RNAV does not change the route aircraft will take. Do you have anything further you can add on that, please?
Yeah, sure. So if an airport wants to change the pitch angle that an aircraft arrives at, so if it's arriving on a more steep angle, which is what we're talking about here, then that is also a change that under the CAA's rules would fall under the requirement to hold an airspace change in order to make that change. So although it's not a change in route, that's kind of general term I used earlier, it's still a proposed change that would trigger the need for an airspace change consultation. And the CAA do that because they want to ensure that airports don't make changes that could be noticed on the ground without consulting with communities and other stakeholders. And that's the reason for that. And just a sort of reminder, no, we're not talking, this is not the airspace change consultation, but just to make you aware, I think some of our stakeholders may feel that there were consultations previous, you know, maybe years ago on airspace change, but it was just to sort of advise that process is very, very long, and that's kind of out with our control, as we're part of a UK-wide programme. We actually started that process back in 2019, and it's still the same review that's happening now. If we manage to go out to consultation in November, we will be the first group of airports, ourselves, Edinburgh, would go out at the same time, and we would actually be the first airports to consult on our airspace, proposed airspace changes in the UK as part of this review. So it's just to let you know, we are still working on it. It's and we are getting to that point. So please do engage in the airspace change process as well.
Thank you very much, Fiona. I think that is all of the questions that we've had in for now. Just in case any more come in, I'll just give us a minute or so. But just to reiterate, as the team have said, thank you very much for taking the time to come and speak to us this afternoon about this proposal. We really appreciate it. And as we said, the most important thing now is to make sure that we get your feedback via those surveys. We are gathering feedback until the 6th of October, so it's plenty of time, hopefully, to read through the proposals. And as I said, we'll send out all of the information that we've been through today after this session. So you'll have all of that to hand as well. I'll just give us a minute in case there's any more questions, but otherwise we'll end the session here. Okay, great. Thank you very much then, once again, and I hope you will have a good rest of your evening. Thank you for taking the time to join us. Bye-bye.